with stereotypical newbies in mind, someone who's just starting out trying to get into tech. But as I was putting it together, I realized, hey, we're all always learning. So to kind of get a feel for the crowd, how many people are working towards maybe a career in the tech industry or have just started one, maybe like less than 1 year in? Anyone really new? Awesome, cool. And then how many people who maybe have a few more years of experience but are currently trying to learn a new technology for their job or want to get into maybe like a parallel thing? All right, there we go, cool. So that pretty much covers all of us. So I think everyone will get a lot of value out of this. So the main things I'm going to talk about are the fear of not belonging, kind of those insecurities that come with going into something new and just feeling like you don't fit in there because you're not one of them yet. How to make your learning work for you. Made some mistakes with learning and learned some better ways to go about it. And then jobs for the pure newbies in the room, and even actually people who are maybe looking for that career change. I've figured out some things in the job hunt I think you will find really, really interesting. So quick background on how I got here. I have tried a lot of different career options, and they all had different things about them that I enjoyed, but they weren't quite the right fit for me because I highly value building and creating things. And so for me, the tech industry really fulfills that aspect of not only am I problem solving, which I did in a lot of my jobs, not only am I able to maybe help other people learn or educate, which is what I really enjoyed from teaching, but I also get to build things, and that's really important for me. Quick background on my tech journey. It started in middle school with htmlgoodies.com, which is still around. You can go check it out. I did just for fun a couple years ago. It was just a website with a guy who put up HTML tutorials, and so I did them, and I wrote websites, yeah. fellow HTML goodies in the house. And he also had some JavaScript stuff and some Perl stuff. Now, I unfortunately had just started looking at the Perl stuff when high school started and kind of crushed all my hopes and dreams, so I didn't get much further than that. But then post-college, I found Coursera and was kind of reinvigorated, and I realized, oh wait, this is still something I can do. This thing that I enjoyed so much, it's still there, and I can jump into it. And then my professional life has revolved a lot around my move. I started the Coursera learning while I lived in Pittsburgh. I was dragged to Akron, rather unhappily at first, but this has turned out to be, or Akron has turned out to be, one of the best things for me because I immediately got involved in Akron Women in Tech, and then through the people I met in the community, I now have a job in tech at VHT. I've been there 6 or 7 months, and that's awesome. So I'm going to talk about that process and how you can emulate it and the valuable things that I learned from that. So a bit about me, and these will come up in some of my stories and examples. One is that I do tend to speak without thinking. Another is that I embrace the awkward, and this is important for the recommendations I give with learning. So I'm not a very socially conscious or aware person sometimes. I like to give the example, one time at dinner, I was with my parents and like another family, and I started asking something that I guess wasn't the best thing to ask. And so my mom started kind of nudging me under the table with her foot, and I looked at her and I said, "Why are you kicking me under the table?" Completely missed that maybe I was saying something I shouldn't be saying. So I'm not great with social cues, but I've learned that when I'm in an awkward situation, I'm able to recognize that it's awkward. I don't necessarily always know how to fix it, but when it happens, I sort of just settle back into it and kind of embrace, like, all right, this is awkward, this is happening, let's just have fun with it. And that definitely comes up with learning something new. And, oops. The last little thing is I have a little bit of a dichotomy with kind of inner beliefs about myself, and I think most of you will be able to relate to at least one of them. So, sorry. A little nervous, got to take a deep breath. So on the one hand, I have this deeply set kind of insecurity or fear. Am I smart enough? Do I deserve to be here? Do I fit in, right? And then on the other hand, I have this very deeply set knowledge that I'm awesome. I like who I am, and I know that I'm an intelligent person, and I know I'm capable of learning. So those two are going to battle each other a little bit as we go through some of these. So first thing off, the fear of not belonging. This is the longer portion of my talk for sure. I think this will take up about half of it, and then the job search and the learning will be the other half, because this is really the fulcrum of stuff. So I'm going to talk about how to really kind of get over this fear of learning. You need to recognize it, embrace it, and face it. And so what I mean by that is recognizing it. I'll give an example of a time I did not recognize my fear and how it did not work out for me. One of the first meetups I went to when I moved to Akron was Akron Code Club, and the topic was some JavaScript something. And I knew it was going to be over my head, but I thought, hey, I'll be able to get at least something out of it, right? Osmosis. I'm going to go. I want to at least meet people. I have no friends. And so I went, and the setup of the talk was kind of a walkthrough of this JavaScript thing, and then it was going to culminate in people pairing up together and working on kind of the tutorial content, right? And so I thought, oh, I can follow along. Yeah, I'm totally capable of that. Well, I got stuck right at the very beginning. There was something that you needed to install, and I couldn't. I don't think I knew about the sudo magic at that point. And I got stuck and then spent the rest of the talk just sort of nervous, like, everyone else is doing things, and I'm just sort of sitting here. And then we got to the pair programming part, and again, I was terrified because I look around the room, and I mean, this is very real, right? I see a bunch of men. There's one other woman in the room, and then like 15, 20 guys. And I'm terrified to ask for help for a couple reasons. One is no one is like me. So I feel like I don't belong in that physical sense. And then two, I had this weird thought that, they were going to make fun of me. If I, paired with someone, I was going to drag them down, and people were going to just look down on me for that. And there was even, the group itself, they were very friendly, they were very open, but I just had all these fears holding me back. And there was even one guy who's in the audience who actually stood up and said, hey, does anyone want to pair? And he sort of just stood there for 30 seconds waiting for anyone to say, yeah, I'll pair with you. And I was like, should I ask? No, I know he's really good programmer. I've met him before. No, he probably wouldn't want to pair with me. Going through all those internal doubts. And so I never spoke up and didn't end up pairing with him. And then I'm looking around the room, and I see that one other woman who now is one of my coworkers. So, spoiler alert. And I sort of gear up. I'm like, all right, I'll ask her to pair. That's less scary. And I'm just about to open my mouth and, shout across the room at her. And then someone else cuts me off and asks to pair with her. So I'm just kind of sitting here and just feeling lost and confused. And it was overall a very negative experience. And I didn't go back to that meetup for several months because I had all of these fears that I related with that specific meetup. But looking back, if I had taken the time to recognize, okay, I'm afraid people are going to laugh at me, or I'm afraid people aren't going to want to help me, I could have deconstructed those pretty easily, right? Because I know that most people are decent people, and they're not going to laugh at you for not knowing something, right? That's just a fact. And then on the same side, if someone doesn't want to help me, they'll say no. And then I just go to the next person. That's not going to end my world if someone says, you know what, I actually can't help you right now, but ask this person. So recognize your fears when they're in front of you and deconstruct the hell out of them. Do not let them hold you back. And that's really, deconstruction of fears is one of the best pieces of advice that I can give you. So I would encourage you to kind of look at what are those fears that are holding you back. Are you afraid of being found out? That people will find out you're not smart enough, or you don't actually know this thing that you think you're supposed to know magically. Recognize what the fear is, why you have it, and then just deconstruct it. Deconstruct it and don't let it hold you back. So the second part is embrace it. So once I was able to accept, hey, I'm afraid because I'm new, I was able to look at opportunities to find other people who are also new. So 2 resources that I highly recommend are Code Newbies and Free Code Camp. So Code Newbies is it started as a Twitter chat for new developers, turned into a podcast, and now is a whole website plus Slack channel. And it's a really awesome community. I love being a part of it. And it was awesome to go there, mostly for the Slack channel, and then they also have a couple groups that meet like once a week, like Ruby Mondays, I think Python Tuesdays, whatever. So it was an awesome way to get experience with people who also were learning like me. So it made asking questions easier because that fear of, oh, people are going to think I'm stupid, that kind of goes away because you're with people who are at your same level. So that was awesome. And then Free Code Camp is, as the name implies, a free coding boot camp. It's all online, but one thing they do that's really awesome is they encourage you to use pair programming through online, just screen sharing and audio feeds, and that's an awesome way to get that practice, again, in a less intimidating environment, maybe. So the awesome things that, especially being involved with Code Newbie, showed me is that I know things that other people don't know, and that was huge for my confidence because I spent all this time being afraid, oh, I don't know this, I don't know this, I don't know this. People are going to look down on me for not knowing these things. And then when I got into these groups where people were asking questions that I knew the answer to, that was huge. So get in a place where you can help other people, and that will do wonders for your confidence. And then I also realized that I don't know things that other people also don't know. So it's also encouraging when you ask a question and someone else says, oh, I don't know the answer to that either. And then it's very validating, right? You're not the dumbest person in the room. There's other people who are also curious about this thing that you're trying to learn. So get around people who are similar to you. And then be okay with not knowing the right answer. This really sunk in for me at an Akron Code Club meetup. Actually, I did go back. And the meetup for that night, we were pair programming on a kata. And for those of you who aren't familiar, a kata is essentially like a programming problem that you solve with code. And it typically takes maybe an hour or two. Obviously, the longer ones can take multiple hours. Some are short. You can do like 20 minutes. But the idea is to practice solving problems with code. So katas are just like, hey, Yahtzee, here are the rules of Yahtzee. Make it work with code, Excuse me. So we were working on a kata that night, and I ended up paired with a guy who is very well known in both, the Northeastern Ohio community and also Ruby community. So I was pretty intimidated to be pairing with him. And we sit down and, he asks, okay, what's the easiest first step that we can start from to start working on this kata problem? And I thought about it and I said, you know what, I think we should start from A. A seems good. And he said, A is okay, but actually what makes the most sense is to start from Z. And I was like, oh, you know what? I see that too. Yeah, that works. Okay, let's start from Z. So we did the kata, we worked it out, and we got to the end of the meetup, and we're all sharing our solutions. And another group gets up, or another pair, and one of the guys in this pair is actually now one of our directors of development at the company I work with. So equal levels of intimidation factor a little bit. But he gets up to present his problem, and his pair had started solving the kata from A, right? From where I had thought we should start or could start. And that was huge for me because I realized, right, if you have 10 people in a room, you're going to have 12 different right answers. There's going to be a lot of different ways you can approach a problem and approach a solution, and it's about how you get there, not necessarily what your specific answer is. And that's going to come up, remember that, because that's going to come up in interviewing too. So as long as you can back up your opinion with logic, you should be good to go. Always be improving. This will come up a couple times as well because it's very important. Always be improving and also embrace the fact that you will always be improving. One of my coworkers pointed out, he said, if you look back at the code you wrote 2 years ago and you still think it looks amazing, you're probably stagnant. That's a bad thing. You need to be able to always be looking at code you've written previously and recognize how it could be improved, how it could be made better, because you should be better than you were then. So don't be afraid that your code sucks now. Like, especially for me, I know I'll write something and I'll think, I know there's a better way to do that. I don't know the better way, but I know it can be better than that because of other code I've seen. But don't let that keep you from at least writing your code, because you'll get there. You'll get there. You're not there yet, but you will get there. Oh, and I did want to actually quote my coworker. He said, if you are improving, you are doing fine, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And that you might just need to tell yourself when you're battling some of those internal fears, right? Hey, if you're improving, you're fine. It's all right. Keep going. All right. So once you've recognized your fear and you've embraced it, settled into the awkward, right, then face it. And I was recently listening to a Ruby Rogues podcast called Learning to Learn. And I'll link to that at the end I think they might post the slides or something. But Katrina Owen had a really good quote in that. She said, if you stay in your comfort zone, you don't learn because you're not stretching. And she also pointed out that you don't want to get 10 steps outside of your comfort zone, because then you'll be like me at that Code Club meetup and just kind of frozen in fear and not able to get any value out of it. You want to be 1 or 2 steps. And I had a friend actually who, she's also, very new to tech, very new, learning a lot, and she went to a conference that, of course, at the beginning had kind of a social hour where people were supposed to talk to each other and make friends. And that was hugely intimidating for her, so she didn't do it. And I said, you know what, that's awesome. You went to the conference, and that was like 2 steps outside of your comfort zone. It was already scary for you to just go to the conference. And so if socializing before the conference was a 6, yeah, don't do it. You don't have to push yourself all the way to the edge of your limits. In fact, that's how burnout happens, right? That's how you just crash and burn. So those 1 or 2 steps, that's completely where you need to be. Examples of this. So when I first, I moved here, or to Akron, sorry, it's all Ohio, right? So I moved to Akron, and I tried to jump into these tech meetups, and I got involved with Akron Women in Tech, and they started asking for speakers. And they started with, they're like, oh, let's do a talk on like HTML and CSS. I'm like, wait, I totally remember all my HTML goodies stuff. I can do a talk on HTML. I can tell people about heading tags and all of that. So I did it. And then, a couple months later, they said, oh, we need someone to do a talk on WordPress. Our original speaker backed out. I'm like, well, I don't know a ton about WordPress, but I know some of the basics. I can give a talk on the basics. That's fine. So I did that. And then a couple months later, I was at Cleveland's Python meetup, and the group of organizers were sort of all talking about how they needed someone to give a talk on this one thing that related to the main guy's talk for the night, like just a short 10-minute kind of intro for people who weren't quite as advanced for the main talk. And that's speaking without thinking. I heard myself say, oh, I'll do it. And I don't think, if I hadn't given those talks at Akron Women in Tech and had, sequentially harder topics, I don't know if I would have done that. But that talk ended up being awesome. I gave a talk. That was my first time really giving it to a room full of strangers, right? That was the first time I showed up at this meetup, the first time I met anyone there. I said I would teach them something. And that was kind of a big deal, but I don't think I would have done that and had that good experience had I not started with that 1 or 2 steps, right? That 1 or 2 steps outside of my comfort zone, and then gradually you can push further and further. So find that sweet spot between your comfort and your stress zone, and figure out what's scary for you. Is that 1 or 2 steps just showing up at a meetup and maybe sitting in the back and being, quiet and leaving right when it ends? That's fine if that's where you need to start. Maybe that 1 or 2 steps is actually asking for help, speaking up and admitting that you don't know something. Maybe it's offering help to someone else. That also can be intimidating, right? Because you don't want to tell them the wrong thing. So find that thing that's that 1 or 2 steps for you and do that. Stretches you, but not breaks you. So I do a lot of things that scare me right now, like this talk, for one. Doing katas at meetups with people, that's still terrifying to me. We do... sometimes we'll do like lunchtime programming practice at work, and I'll have to, I work in QA right now, but for those I'm usually pairing with a full-time developer, and that's very intimidating for me. Even though they're my peers and they're my coworkers, that's definitely 2 steps outside of my comfort zone, and all those fears of not being smart enough, those are part of those lunchtime katas, but I do them because you gotta practice and you gotta keep going at it. And this might sound harsh, but it's actually very liberating. You are not a special snowflake. You are not that unique. These fears that you have, these insecurities you face, other people face them too. Everyone in this room started learning code in general at some point, and everyone in this room is trying to learn something new. So you're not that special. And that's awesome, because then you don't have to feel like you don't fit in, right? You can deconstruct that fear and say, you know what, I'm not that special. Other people are afraid of this stuff too, so I can be honest about it because there are many people like me. Oh yeah, and then they even have a term for this, right? You're so not special, there's a term called imposter syndrome, which the definition from Wikipedia is, those exhibiting the syndrome remain convinced that they are frauds and do not deserve the success they have achieved. I even face that a little bit now in my job. I'm like, oh, I got lucky to get this job. If this and this hadn't happened, no way they would have hired me. I find a way to rationalize, oh, well, they must have hired me for this because it's not for my skill, So that's a thing. And again, since now you know it's a thing, when you recognize it in yourself, you can kick it out the door. So 2 pieces of advice sort of on the negative side. One is you might find yourself being a little bit like Chandler. Maybe you make jokes about how much your code sucks. Maybe when you ask for help, you follow it up with, I'm terrible and I'm really stupid, but would you please help me? Don't do that. Don't be Chandler. It's not healthy. Again, always be improving. Be able to talk intelligently about, you know what, my code could be better in this way, or I know my code could be better, could you help me figure out how? But don't just blanket statement, oh, this is terrible, oh, I'm the worst. It's not helpful, and it's not going to get you where you want to go. And then you will run into difficult people. I had a open source interaction that was slightly negative, not as bad as it could have been, but I submitted a APR and it actually got accepted and everything. But I think the person who accepted it didn't read it very, very thoroughly because there was a little bit of an obvious error in it, right? I made a very basic mistake. And another guy on the project was rereading through my PR, and this was his comment. Not helpful. To me, I read this, and it insinuates to me, are you an idiot? Like, what is this crap? That's the message I get when I see that. So this was pretty hard for me because, again, this was my first open source attempt, if you will. And then when I saw my error, I'm like, oh yeah, duh, that was stupid. But this, it's not helpful because he's not even saying necessarily that there's a problem. He's sort of just being a jerk. So you're going to run into people like this, right? And maybe he just had a bad day. People have bad days. Or maybe he cares more about the code than people. There are people like that too. And you're gonna hit those people. So it's very important to have a community around you. Like I was able to go to some of my coworkers, one of my coworkers, and say, hey, this happened. Is this normal? And she said, no, that guy's a jerk. Like ignore him. And so that helped. And then I was able to go in and fix my problem. But without that support, this really turned me off of even going to fix my problem, right? Because, like, okay, well, if you don't respect me, then I don't know. I don't want to be a part of your project. But luckily, also another project contributor jumped in who was intensely helpful, over the top helpful, and he kind of pulled me back in. And So we were talking back and forth with this original guy, the helpful guy, and then me. And then this third guy jumps in, and Krantz is my GitHub name, just to be clear. But he jumps in with this. Now, their GitHub repo had, the CI integration and everything. So I saw that on GitHub. It has the red X, and it says, you need to make sure all your changes match up. You have conflicts, basically. And then this guy jumps in and says, the PR has conflicts. And I think my actual response was, do you have a suggestion on how you want me to fix them, or what is the purpose of this comment? And I may be reading into it, but I just felt like he just wanted to throw gasoline on the fire almost, and like jump on the train of beating me down a little bit, because it was just an unhelpful comment, and you're gonna hit people like that. So you gotta have people around you to build you back up when that happens. Don't take it to heart. Just roll it off. So, how to learn, and I am actually right on time. Got my little timer up here, so we'll be good. I'm gonna aim to leave about 10-15 minutes at the end for questions, so you know what we're going for. So, first piece of advice on how to learn is to get really good at one thing. This may speak more to the pure beginners in the room, if you will. But I like to recommend to people that, especially if you're just starting out, focus on 1 or 2 languages at a time and get really good at them. And this applies to more experienced people too, right? I mean, if you're trying to learn new things, don't try to learn 6 new things at once. You're probably still going to get overwhelmed with that. And the example I like to tell for this is I was interacting with one woman just, in my Learn to Code journey, and every week it seemed like she was posting about this new technology piece she was trying to learn or use or experiment with, or this new language she was jumping into. And I thought, wow, she is really on fire, man. She's a genius. She's like picking all this stuff up and just going. And then a couple months into me kind of knowing her, she asked a question about the for loop logic behind it, and she said she just wasn't getting it. She didn't understand how a for loop worked, and could someone explain it to her? Now, if you're at the point in your journey where you are also still trying to figure out how a for loop works, don't want to discourage you. It's something that once you get it, you'll get it. And we'll talk about that concept actually in a couple slides. But loops are very foundational to programming, and this woman had been kind of learning to code for 2 years. And I thought, how does she not, or the fact that she does not understand a foundational concept at this point is not good. And then I thought, it's probably because she's learning all these things at the same time, or jumping from one thing to another, and she's getting a sort of basic understanding and knowledge of stuff, but she's not getting that deep understanding, and she's not really getting it. And that helped me too, because I do also tend to jump from one thing to another. I like new, I like exciting. And so seeing that really helped me realize, I need to focus in and learn JavaScript and Ruby, and not these 5 other things at the same time. Let me get good at these 2 things, and then I'll move on. And I'll probably learn it faster in the long run, because I'll have a deep understanding of a lot of the logic that goes into concepts and things. So, slow down. Get really good at one thing. Badges do not equal understanding. I feel like higher education, college, kind of trained me to go for completion, right? You got to finish the class, get the degree, just pass that test, do as little as you can to just get by and get out the door. And that's sort of what education has been about. So jumping into these online classes and, especially the Coursera stuff, it's great information and it's great resources. But if you're taking a class purely to finish it, you're not going to get it. You're gonna end the class on for loops and not understand how a for loop works. And I realized this. I had signed up for a class on just in general, general development basics, and it worked through a Vagrant and a database and a bunch of things to full stack. That's what it was called, full stack development basics. And I realized about halfway through, I'm like, wow, I am not here. This database stuff is new, and the Vagrant stuff took me a week to work through all the kinks and bugs with that. And I thought, you know what, I just need to finish this class and push through it. And a couple weeks after trying to push through it and verging on just burnt out frustration, I realized finishing this class is going to do nothing for me if I don't actually understand what's going on. So, and it's really easy, especially with the internet. Everyone wants to give you badges now. Everyone wants to give you that certificate of completion. Don't worry about those. Don't even collect them, honestly, if it's going to get in the way of you actually learning and actually understanding something. Oh, another quote from the Ruby Rogues podcast is, the problem with valuing the outcome is you start looking for shortcuts to get to the outcome. It's like the opposite of talent. You end up hoping you're just going to walk on the field and be great. And if you're not great, you have no tools in your belt to deal with it. So if you're always just looking to try to get to the end as quickly as possible, you don't learn those problem-solving skills. You don't figure out how to get there. Sort of like, what was that movie, Click? If you're always skipping ahead, you don't get to actually enjoy the journey. So don't collect badges. And then combined mediums. One of my big light bulb moments in learning is when I had started working through that free code camp curriculum, and it's JavaScript based. And then I added on, someone had mentioned John Duckett's book, JavaScript and jQuery, which is amazing. I highly recommend it. And the biggest leaps I made in my learning is when I would practice something, learn a new concept, maybe practice it a little bit in free code camp, not quite fully internalize it, right? I sort of got it, sort of didn't. And then I'd go and read the complementary section, if you will, in the jQuery book, and the light bulb would go off. Like, oh, I get that. And vice versa. I'd read something in the book, and then go practice it in real life, and I would get it. It would sink in. So combined mediums. Don't go out and get 5 different books and sign up for 5 different JavaScript classes. Do, maybe one online resource, one book or other resource of your choice, and then combine it with some community-based things, and that will really accelerate your learning. And be careful of burnout. I love this cartoon. Burnout is very real, and it takes more time to recover from burnout than it does to prevent it from happening. So I actually just recently, last couple weeks, have been really hard for me, like energy-wise, and I had to say no to, I think, 3 different kind of events or things that I'm involved in. I had to say, you know what, not this week, sorry, I need a break. And I'm okay with that because taking 2 or 3 weeks off is vastly better than reaching the complete end of my rope, right? It's that stretch yourself but don't break concept, same thing. Reaching the complete end of my rope, snapping, and then needing 2 months to recover. So burnout happens especially in learning. So if you feel yourself, you're like, wow, my brain, this is too much. Take a week off. Take 2 weeks off. Take all the time you need to be able to tackle that thing fresh. Because learning is hard, and it's tiring. When I started my new job, I was exhausted at the end of every day for like the first 3 months. It is very, very hard to learn something new. And have a purpose for what you are learning. This was huge for me. I started out just, I want to learn code things. And, did that, I'll learn a little bit here and a little bit here, a little bit here. And I didn't really see, again, that progress in my learning until one of my friends challenged me. He said, if you take 3 months to really plug into like JavaScript and CSS, you can make $25 an hour freelancing with WordPress development. And for me at the time, $25 an hour was rolling in the dough. So I was like, that sounds amazing. I unfortunately don't like WordPress all that much, so I never got fully into the WordPress development, but that impetus really pushed me to focus in on learning JavaScript, focus in on getting more practical coding experience. And it was about 6 months after that I eventually accepted the job that I have now. So having that direction, even though I didn't end up where I thought I was going, having that direction allowed me to focus in and really improve my skills. So make sure you have a purpose. And I want to do a quick plug for this TED Talk. I think I actually didn't link to it at the end, but I will add it in for the slides that they post. This talk, her basic premise for her talk is stop trying to figure out your grand purpose in the universe and do something and get good at it, and you're probably going to really enjoy that thing if you're good at it. So I highly recommend her talk. Don't don't want to go through it all right now, but pick a purpose and go for it, and you'll probably enjoy it. So one more thing from the Ruby Rogues podcast I want to share is this NOPS acronym for learning, and it stands for notice it, own it, push into it, and stick with it. So it's pretty similar to my REF acronym from earlier, realize it, embrace it, face it. But this is, notice it. If you're struggling with recursion, notice, hey, I'm struggling with recursion. Own it, right? Accept it. Hey, recursion is hard for me. All right. I accept that. I admit that. What do we do next? And then push into it. Rewrite some recursive statements over and over again. Read 5 different explanations of how recursion works. I love Explain Like I'm 5 on Reddit. Oh my gosh, there's one explanation on there that compared object-oriented programming and functional programming, which I could not get for the longest time until I read this one little paragraph comparing it to a play, and it was awesome. It clicked. So just keep going, push into it until it clicks, and then stick with it. Once you have that knowledge, stick with it, guy. Once you have that knowledge, really, really absorb it. Make sure it sticks. Make sure you don't forget it. Cement that in. All right, so jobs, how to get them. We are on time, in case you're wondering. We're doing good. So how I found VHT, which is where my job is now, I highly recommend as a way for people to look for jobs. I think how people currently look for jobs kind of sucks because job boards are horrible. And I wish and hope that more people could and would look for a job this way. So how I found VHT was I started with the company. I didn't even look at their job postings. I sort of observed what VHT did over time. So when I first moved to Akron, I was introduced to them because they sponsor the Akron Code Club meetup, and so that's when I kind of first heard their name. And then with Akron Women in Tech, we started looking for a food sponsor and got connected with the VHT right away for that. And I thought, all right, this company, they're invested in the community. I like that. Cool. And then as I got to know more people that worked there, and I thought, I like the people that work there. They seem pretty cool. All right, star number 2 for VHT. And then the third thing that I found out that was the most impactful was I learned that they had hired 4 graduates from the Software Craftsmanship Guild, which is a coding boot camp up in Akron. So I thought, or I knew, I was able to see that, they not only accept people who are newer and learning and maybe don't have that CS degree, but it's obviously an environment where they have more senior developers on staff who are willing to mentor and help people build up their skills. And a learning environment is very important to me. So knowing those 3 things, when I got to the point where I thought, all right, you know what? It's time for me to start looking for a job in tech. I want to do this. It's time to do this. I immediately went to my friend Heather at VHT and I said, are you guys hiring? Because I want to work for VHT. And they weren't at that second, but I think it was only about a month and a half, maybe 2 months later, she came back and she said, oh, wait, we're hiring now, though. And then a month after that, I was working there. So start with the company first. That's the biggest piece of advice I can find, especially if you're someone who is completely new. You want an environment where you're going to thrive. You're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. You want a place where you can build your skills. So company first. And then interviewing. So I don't typically get nervous for interviews because I like to talk. And interviews are mostly talking. Not so much with coding, though, right? Coding interviews involve also a lot of coding. And so the night before, my husband asked me, are you nervous for this interview? And I said, yeah, I'm very nervous. He was like, I don't know how to handle this. You're never nervous for interviews. This is completely new. And I said, well, in a normal interview, they ask you questions and you answer them, and I'm really good at answering questions. But in a coding interview, they ask you to code, and you have to code. You can't you can't bullshit that. Like, the skills you have are the skills you have, and you can't make that up on the fly. So I was pretty nervous going into it. And then I did a kata, a pair programming problem with a current employee as part of my interview. And that was very nerve-wracking for me because, so I sit down, sitting next to this, senior developer guy. We got our kata problem up on the screen, and then the tape starts playing in my brain, right? Oh man, am I smart enough to do this? I don't know if I can handle this. What if I say something that's just the complete wrong thing to say, and he figures out that I'm an idiot? And what if I write the wrong code? Or what if what I write is really bad, and then they just don't want to hire me, but I want this job? And as you can imagine, having that tape playing in your brain kind of impedes the thought process of actually solving the coding problem. So it took me maybe longer than it should have. I did eventually get a solution out, and I did eventually let myself talk through my thought process of how I was getting to that solution. But it took a while, and it wasn't as smooth as it could have or should have been. And unfortunately, there's no magic pill for that. That just takes practice. So if you know you're going to be interviewing, practice pair programming, practice live coding. And I know I haven't experienced this personally because I'm still new, but I have heard that a lot of companies like you to whiteboard code, which is terrible and horrible and everyone hates it, but they do it. So, practice that, right? Get some friends together, some people who are maybe at your level or a little bit higher development. Practice some algorithm whiteboarding. It's the only way to kind of calm down that movie in your head that's telling you all these negative things. And then the important thing to remember, too, is most good companies, when they have you pair with someone or when they have you whiteboard code, they're not as concerned with your solution as with how you get there. So remember that, too, and that will help with the nerves. As long as you're talking through your logic, back to there's no one right answer, right? As long as you're talking through your thought process, that's really what they're looking for. And I'm going to quote my coworker again. He said, "It is much easier to change a candidate's coding practices than their thought processes or their ability to solve complex problems." So keep that in mind. And not every company maybe has that mentality, but I would argue that if a company doesn't have that mentality, you probably don't want to work there. So be okay with that too. And last little thing here, negotiation, I know is terrifying for a lot of people, but do it. This was especially hard for me, right? Because I had a weird mixture of what maybe was imposter syndrome, right? Because I didn't feel like I deserved this job offer that I had gotten. I thought, I just got so lucky. But then I also had the realistic part of, well, no, I don't have professional programming experience. That's accurate. I don't have a CS degree. That's accurate. And so it was very, very difficult for me to work up the gumption to negotiate. I talked to a bunch of people. I'm like, do you think this is okay if I do negotiate? And everyone said, yes, you have to. You just have to. It's what's expected. So I wrote down my little spiel of, bullet point reasons why I'm worth more money. And I practiced it a couple times. And then I called the HR person and I read it and my heart's pounding. But I did it. And guess what? It worked, right? They met me in the middle, got a little bit more money, and they still hired me. And I know that's one of the big fears, too, is people think, if I ask for more, what if they take away the job offer? Unless you are supremely egotistical and ask for like $30,000 more, I'm pretty sure they're not going to take back that offer. So, do it. Do it, because a lot of companies offer you expecting that you're going to negotiate, right? So if you don't negotiate, a lot of times you're taking a lower offer than you're worth. Quoting another coworker. This was the best piece of advice, I think, for a negotiation that I ever got. I was talking with a coworker after the fact, so I had already gotten hired and did the negotiation, but she said, they are paying you for a job. At the end of the day, even if you feel like, I don't have this experience, so I'm not really good enough to ask for this salary, I don't know. They are paying you for a job. You are going to go to work roughly 8 hours every day. You are going to put forth your best effort. You're going to learn. You're going to improve. You're going to be a contributing member of their team. You're going to add value to this company. They're paying you to do all those things. So ask for money for all those things that they are paying you to do. So what is your effort worth? And ask for that. Don't let your fears and your things that you think you don't have enough of, don't let those hold you back. Don't let those hold you back. So how much is your effort worth? And then this is one of my favorite graphs that I stumbled across on the internet. I definitely lived this, right? I took my first Coursera class. I hit this quick upward spike. I thought, oh man, I wrote a word search puzzle. This is the best. I can do this. And then I started delving into all the things, and you realize how much you don't know, and you fall off this cliff of confusion. And you get too good for all those intro tutorials that walk you through step by step, and you want the next challenging thing, and the next challenging thing is really challenging. And then you eventually kind of get to this magical job ready thing. But I will say this is my one piece of advice with this graph. You may not feel job ready until after you actually have your first job and have settled in a little bit. So even if you feel like you're not quite at the top of this upswing of awesome, go for that job anyway. Just go for it. One of the biggest skills I've learned in regards to being job ready, I learned on the job, and that is how to ask questions. And this is really important, especially if you have that fear of, I don't want to sound stupid. Well, ask questions in a better way. And the difference is this. When I first started, I was lost and confused and just floating around trying to find a grip somewhere. And I would ask, what do I do? This is happening. What do I do? This broke. What do I do? And that's okay when you're completely new and you're still trying to figure out how maybe the company's systems all connect, and you really just need to know how things work. But relatively quickly, you're going to get to a point where you need to ask questions more along the lines of, okay, I'm having this problem. I tried these things. They didn't work. Here's what I think might be wrong based on this information, but I'm not quite sure how to get to this endpoint that I know I need to get to. Can you help me figure out the best way to do that? Right? So you say what effort you've put in, what you've tried to do, and ask for help in figuring out how to solve the problem rather than asking for the solution. And that's connected right back to the, don't collect badges, don't go for completion. You're not just going for completion, you're going for learning, you're going for understanding. You want to be able to solve a similar problem that maybe has different variables. You want to be able to solve that again on your own in the future. So if you just ask for the answer, you're going to have to ask for help again when you have a similar problem with different variables. But if you ask for help in thinking about it, you'll get there a lot faster. So, in conclusion, we are there. We made it. Find your awesome. You are, so accept that. Figure it out. Stretch yourself, but don't break. Focus in on what you want and go after it. And you may have noticed a common theme with everything I talked about, and that's community. Community is how I got my job. Community is how I was able to challenge myself in some of my fears. And I will say two things related to community, and then we'll wrap up. One is that networking sucks, and I hate it, and it's terrible. So don't network, just go hang out with people. And meetups are awesome for that, right? You just go hang out with people, you code with them, maybe you just go and sit in the back for a couple months, and then you work up the gumption to code, and that's fine, right? Just go hang out with people. And last thing is that Free Code Camp did a newbie developer survey, and it's awesome data. I'm going to link to it at the end of my slides. But one of the most interesting things was 57% of people who are new to learning how to code had never been to an in-person coding event. So no meetups, no Rails bridges, nothing. And I found that very interesting and also a little bit, sad's not quite the right word, but not right? You need to be coding with other people. That's essential. And maybe you live in an area that's more rural. Maybe there aren't meetups around. Maybe your city just doesn't have a tech scene. And in that case, there are tons of resources online, like Free Code Camp. You can pair program with someone live, and that's great. That's awesome. You can still do that. That resource is out there. But if you have stuff around you to go to in person, absolutely do it. Absolutely do it. There's only so much you can learn from a book or an online tutorial before you get your hands dirty and work with someone, which is, spoiler alert, most of what you do at a company. So that's very important. So I'm going to leave these resources up if you want to, I guess, Google them now. I talked about most of these, except that last one was just an interesting article I read, so I thought I would throw that up there. It relates a little bit to my mentality with how I approach learning. And then they're also going to link to these slides, I believe, as well. So the live links will be available. And, yeah, so questions? That's what I got. Yes? The specific learning how to learn podcast is general learning. The podcast itself does usually focus on Ruby, but that specific learning how to learn podcast is in general, yeah, learning. Anyone else? Yes?
Yeah, for those of us who are in, lack of a better term, management or leadership positions,
Mm-hmm.
what are some things that we can do to create an environment for learning? Not just the new team members, but everyone in general.
Yeah, good question. So the question was, for the sake of the recording, for people in management, how can you create that environment of learning? And I will say two things to that. One, and this is slightly off topic, so forgive me, but I will specifically address your question in a second. I was thinking about that first meetup I went to that was so scary and how it took me a while to go back. And I think if someone had reached out to me after the meetup and had that one-on-one contact and said, hey, it was great to see you. If you come back, I'd love to pair with you. That would have made a huge difference. So related to creating a culture of learning, you want to intentionally open that door. Because like I said, people there were perfectly friendly. People stood up and asked, hey, do you want to pair program? But it wasn't directed at me personally, and so it took a lot more effort for me to accept help. So make it very easy, make it intentional. And then for company-specific work, one thing that VHT does that I love is that we mostly pair program. Our developers are largely pair programming every day for most of the work that they do, so that's awesome. And then we do have this, we have people who are invested in helping others learn, and that has led to having some of those lunchtime things that I talked about. So we had a lunchtime programming practice, so we would pick up kata and a language and work through that programming problem over several weeks. And then recently someone else also started up an Erlang practice because we use Erlang, and Erlang is new for most people. So again, every week over lunch, if you want to come learn a little bit more about Erlang, different people would give presentations on different weeks. So having resources like that available, I think, is very good. Oh, and we also do, like on Fridays, we have a Tech Review Friday. And so people can present a short, 30-minute talk on either something they found interesting in general. I actually gave this talk for practice for them, for my coworkers, or sometimes a new tool that you've learned that we either use or are going to start using. So it really is just a culture of learning because we have those opportunities intentionally available for people. Anyone else? I'll add one last quick question then, and then we can wrap up. I did get a question previously. Someone asked if I had ever had a mentor. And I wanted to address that because I think mentorship is awesome and it's valuable, but it's not necessarily for everyone in the strictest mentor sense. So, and I've seen, especially people in kind of the newbie community get really hung up on, how do I find a mentor? How do I ask someone? How do I make a mentorship thing happen? And mentorship can be awesome, and for some people it's what they need. But I know for me, I'm much more focused on a community of mentors, if you will. I have my community around me, and for any one question that might come up, I have maybe a different person I can go to ask for help with that specific topic. So if you're someone who struggles with a rigid mentor relationship, that's fine. Just have lots of them, and that's fine too. That also counts. So whatever works for you, figure out what learning works for you. All right, cool. Well, I'm available for questions afterwards or talking. I like talking, so I'd love to catch up with some of you later. Have a good rest of your day.